Let's discuss section sizing and borders. Now, when you go into a section, you're going to be able to see here, if you click on the edit button, it'll give you a row count, and that's going to be your height. You could increase that if you would like or decrease it. It's also going to give you this height option here, and this one is fairly important. What it does is it determines the space between the top and bottom of your section. So for this section, you can actually see there's 0 space because I have my images all the way up against the edge of the section. Most sections, however, are going to have space. So let's use this section as an example. You'll see the height is set at small. And so what this is you'll see at the top and bottom, these can only go so high because there's this white space right here and here. And so you can change that if you want wider gaps or smaller gaps. And so essentially most sections are just going to have some of that built-in white space at the top and the bottom, and it's going to help your website not feel too cluttered. So if we go to this section, this is part of my footer, but it still has, this one is set at medium, so you can see it has a little more of that built-in space at the top and the bottom. So if you ever have a section that feels too cluttered, you can try bumping this up. And on the other side, if you have a section and it feels like there's too much space, you can always bump this guy down. It's a nice quick adjustment. With that, you also have alignment options. And so most sections will be center aligned, but there will be times where you might want to have all your items at the top with a lot of space in the bottom, or vice versa. And so if you ever do find a section feels kind of lopsided with the space, go ahead and check if your alignment is center aligned. So now let's talk about dividers. So every section has its background, which we've talked about in a previous video. It has its spacing, and then it's going to have a divider between each section. Now, it's not always going to be visible, so let's look at a couple examples. So we go to the first section and go to the bottom, you can see the divider is turned on. And so the shape that we have here is this curved line. And so that's what gives this curved effect right here. Once you turn your divider on, you can go through a bunch of different options. And each of these options can be customized. So for example, this option, you can change the width. You can change the height. You can also change these more specifically if you want to get really specific here. And so there are a lot of little customizations you can choose even after you've chosen which divider you would like. And then you can also, let me make this a little more normal real quick. We'll do this guy. There we go. Okay. And then once you choose your shape, you can also on top of that add a stroke if you'd like. And so this is orange. We're going to want to change that so we can see it. We could do a blue. We could do black. You can change the thickness of that stroke. And so you can combine essentially the shape and the stroke to make a bunch of different dividers depending on what you're looking for. So this divider here, we have those waves with a small black stroke. This section is flat with blue. Let me actually, oh, that was not that. Let's go over here to see it a little clearer. So yes, so we have our swoop. You can add a border. This is flat with no line. And so one thing I would just recommend is if you decide to play around with your dividers is go ahead and see if you have dividers already on your site. For example, if I go to this one, he has a divider. I would encourage you to see what the settings are on the dividers you already have to keep them consistent. So for instance, This one I have the waves and then my dividing line is 4 pixels. And so if you decide you want to add these to maybe above, maybe you want this to match, I would just really encourage you to make sure that your pixels match up because that's going to go a very long way in making your website look consistent versus if, for example, and these aren't going to match perfectly, but say you did waves on both of them, however, perhaps this one, these were 8 pixels. If you get inconsistent with the thickness, it's just one of those little things that you're going to notice, and it's not going to help your site look as clean as you want it to be. So that's just a little tip with dividers, to make sure to look at what dividers are already on your website before adding new ones, because if you can match them up, it'll really go a long way in improving the cohesion of your website.